Hello and welcome back to the Q&A. So today's question is going to be on the Bard class, but before we get into that, I just need to say that if you have a question, please leave it in the comments below. As always, the more kind of broad a topic or more kind of interesting, talky it is, the better, and I'll stick it in my list of questions and put it in the show. I'm kind of running out of things for the list of questions, so yeah, it'd be pretty cool if anyone who has a question would leave it. Anyway, with that, let's talk about the Bard. So the question is, what's your view on adding the Bard as a new class? I recall Blizzard saying in an interview that they wanted to add a fourth role, a support role that buffs everyone else throughout the encounter. A Bard would fit quite well for this. Imagine jamming with your acoustic guitar to empower your allies, sing or use your harp to heal, or unleash the power of a heavy metal electric guitar to destroy your foes. Yeah, electric guitar and harp, dual wield them. Perfect. So, yeah, right, the Bard, first of all, it was actually revealed as the second hero class back in April 2008, but it was an April Fool's joke. And, well, let's just take you through some of the little things. I will get on to the serious parts later. So, it's going to have two different specs. The first one was Metal. Its abilities were I Am Murloc, which transforms you into a Murloc. Tape Jam, an indie debuff. Shoegazer, another indie debuff. Epic Solo, which begins an epic solo to enthrall up to 10 enemy targets within a 20-yard radius, causing them to rock out and take rock damage per second, and that would pretty much break PvP, I think. There's also Starstruck, which increases the Bard's stage presence, ooh, and Axe Specialization, which increases your proficiency with axes. I suppose, was this, yeah, were weapon proficiencies even a thing then? And can I even say proficiency? Who the fuck knows? Next, there was the punk rock one. This is clearly the spec for people with a wholly inferior taste in music. And it is a non-conformity, dispels fear, mind control, and similar effects. Mosh Pit, which removes all movement impairing effects and increases movement speed by 50% for the whole party. I don't think anyone's actually been in a mosh pit. You can't move as fuck and you just get hurt. Next thing is Shred, a punk rock talent, and Rock and Roll Racing, which is totally not a reference to one of their past games. So there you go, that was their little joke. And yeah, funny one, Blizzard. For an actual Bard itself, well, the main game that actually has a Bard in it that I would know of is Lord of the Rings Online. And I never actually did play a Bard, but they did have this cool little pseudo Guitar Hero thing where you could play different songs. It wasn't in combat, I don't think, but essentially a Bard would just be a buff class, and Blizzard had talked about adding a fourth role, a support role, which really a support role, it's a bit like how shamans used to be in vanilla, where the only reason you bring a shaman is for their totems and their buffs. Now, there's problems with this, and there's probably some good things as well. First, it's a new kind of gameplay, that's usually a good thing, so I definitely think that it has potential in that regard. Now, I think there's also some issues with the attractiveness of the class, especially from the perspective of it being a fourth role, where the problem with this would be that it's not like a healer kind of makes, you're healing your friends, a damage dealer, you're killing things, a tank, you're tanking things. This, you're just clicking different people and clicking a buff button. I'm not really sure that it would translate into the most fun of gameplay. At the end of the day, what it would just turn into, perhaps, is you fiddling around with a really complicated UI to make sure you optimally buff everyone, which is a bit of an issue. Now, another problem would be making the role necessary. Perhaps it's not such a good idea to have this fourth role in, because it disrupts the current trinity that we have at the minute. If you add in a fourth one, perhaps it turns out you need that fourth one to be there, and that can sort of disrupt raids and that kind of thing. It's not that it's bad having sticking in a fourth role, I'm not really too sure about sticking it in halfway through the game's life. That said, maybe a breath of fresh air into the game. We can't really know until it is a thing, and, well, I don't know if it will be a thing or not, of course, because I cannot see into the future. Now, another thing is that it could just end up being, just another buff class with buff abilities similar to what we have at the minute, that just has skinned hotkeys. If you think of the WoW systems and how WoW gameplay is, it would just be another hotkey-based class, and how can you really make that feel bardy and feel interesting? It could just end up being skinned hotkeys, and I'm not really particularly convinced that that is optimal. And then, as I said, of course, from a gameplay perspective, could it just be odd and a little bit fiddly? And you know what I mean when I say that? It's like, the way healers are, where you just have a big grid of different bars to click to keep people up. Well, at least there's a little bit more thought to that, in that you're keeping people's levels up, you're reacting to spike damage and things like that. A buff class would just be, okay, everyone has their buff, and then if you did have something like, say, you could give, you had a tank cooldown that you could use on the tank to mean that they take 10% less damage. That's kind of cool, not really too, it seems quite like a fiddly thing, and this would only work in organized raiding. Now, there's sometimes issues with things that only work in organized raiding because it means that outside of that, they're sort of pointless. A little bit of an issue. It's just, I know it's really easy to nitpick with anything, but I just think that there are some issues. Now, in terms of the positives, oh wait, one last issue. It would mean that having one role, there's this new 4th role, only having one class that can do it, it would mean that they'd have to be adding in more and more specs to other classes. So essentially this would have to come with a 4th spec coming to other classes so that there can be more buff classes than just one, because that's a little bit of a class imbalance that's perhaps just too much for Blizzard to take. You know, it's just going to end up every raid needs a bard, duh, and that would just be weird. So yeah, onto positives. Well, first of all, it's a very different class from any of what we have at the minute, and it's very, very, very different. Even, you know, people talking about a Demon Hunter, an Archbishop, you know, all the different other hero classes. They're all sort of variants and spins on the main kind of damage, healer, DPS archetypes. Well, I suppose magic, physical archetypes. This, however, is completely different to that, which is always a positive. And now that complete difference would be more of an aesthetic thing. I'm not too sure how they could add in interesting and sort of bard-specific gameplay that's really good within World of Warcraft. Now, one thing that wouldn't happen is they wouldn't put in like a rock out with your like big electric guitar thing, because it just doesn't fit the game. If it was a bard, I think it would have to be literally bardish, not you're some sort of rock musician. I don't think that would work, which means that how can you translate this into more than just one role? It's not like you can terrify and kill opponents with music. Like, at the end of the day, it really takes away from the Lich King if the Lich King gets killed by a sick guitar riff. You know? Well, there would be, so it's kind of hard to do that. I suppose there would be more of a buff and a debuff class if they were doing that. I'm just not... It's hard. I think if there was being a bard, it would have to be in a new game, and the bard class is kind of designed from the ground up to play in a very unique way. I think Lord of the Rings Online probably did that, however, I'm not really sure. I haven't played it enough to say, but anyone who has played a bard in Lord of the Rings Online, do let me know what you think. And hell, even if you're really dying to play a bard, just pick up the game for free and try it. I don't know what their free-to-play model's like. It's probably not horrific. Turbine are usually not that bad with their free-to-plays, but it could be interesting. It could fill that little bard itch that you have. But yeah, overall, I think that it's the sort of thing that could be quite cool, but there would probably be issues just with how it affects the game and the balance and how it slots in, and I don't think Blizzard would really be able to do the bard much justice with the sort of player mechanics that they have at the minute. Now, if the class was in, I think it would probably end up being mainly a support class, but perhaps it has heals. That said, its heals would nearly sort of fold into support, so I don't know, it would be quite hard to give it 3 roles, I guess. And on top of that, I'm just not sure if it would really be popular enough to justify the development time. When I say that, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who you say to them, you can be a badass paladin, or a rogue with knives, or a hunter with a pet, or a guy with a lute. Sometimes that wouldn't really translate into stuff for a lot of players. That said, a lot of the WoW player base is, you know, again, a little bit older than some games, and probably might see a little bit more value in the idea of a bard class than, say, like... You know what I mean. I guess. Not every class has to be an OMG so awesome dude bro class, which is fair enough. I'm just not really sure. Honestly, I think what's most likely next expansion, well, it depends on the expansion. If the expansion is a Burning Legion themed one, I think it's got to be the Demon Hunter. And there's even people in the comments who've been putting up great theories where Illidan has actually been sort of transformed and demonified enough to the point where he could train new demon hunters, which I think would be really interesting. And because Warcraft demon hunters, essentially Illidan, they're nothing like hunters. It is, well, it does have hunter in the name, it is a very distinct class from a hunter. So that would be cool. But yeah, overall the whole hero class idea is interesting. It seems like they kind of stuck themselves in a corner with making a hero class in Wrath of the Lich King, and it's quite hard to add more classes. It's hard to add classes to a game when you have so many at the minute, and just keeping them all differentiated. I mean, a monk and a rogue, some people would say, wow, how do they manage to pull that off? Because on paper, monk and rogue perhaps sort of similar, but in terms of actual gameplay, I hate playing rogues, and I absolutely love playing my Windwalker monk. So yeah, Blizzard, if there is anyone that could pull off a bard eventually, maybe not in World of Warcraft, maybe in some other MMO or something like that, I think Blizzard are probably the people to do it, because they have a way of making things work. But yeah, at the end of the day, this video has really came to no solid conclusion. It's just a little bit of rambling, and there's no way I can come to a solid conclusion. It's something which I think it's probably not for me, but there's other people who could enjoy it, and therefore I'm not going to say it shouldn't be in the game, because that would just be me being a selfish prick, which I'm probably not. Maybe, who knows, maybe I'm a selfish prick. We'll probably find out someday. It just depends, how early do I sell out? That's when you'll know. Anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks for watching. Please do leave any questions you have, and I'll see you next time.